So we are recording the interview of Bill O'Malley. This interview is being conducted by David Barry from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the Veteran Military Center in Dayton, Ohio. It is 3:30 p.m. on September 11th, 2018. Why don't we start with where and when were you born?
Cleveland. Cleveland, Ohio, February 1st, 1946.
And who were your parents and what did they do?
Both of them are deceased now. My father, Jim, was a truck driver, and my mother, Agnes, was just a homemaker.
Did you have any siblings?
Oh, yes. I had two brothers and three sisters. Two have since been deceased, but the other three are still with us.
Did any of them serve in the military?
No, I was the first member of my generation in our family to serve in the military.
What were you doing before you joined the military?
Before I joined the military, I was a photo engraver's apprentice. Photo engraving was an art hooked up with the graphic arts, and I had aspirations of someday being a photo engraver with the newspapers. And that just didn't work out. There are no more photo engravers with newspapers. Through automation, the craft of the art is just gone.
Oh. So then, which branch of the military did you serve in?
Well, I was drafted and served in the Army.
Did you get a choice in your branch of service, or did they just tell you?
Well, not really a choice. When I was drafted out of Cleveland in 1966, the Marine Corps was also drafting. And every 2 or 3 days, you would get maybe 100 or 120 some people that were drafted, and you'd be at the induction center, and you'd be standing there in line, and a Marine Corps sergeant would come out, and he would count off 1 through 10. The 11th man, he'd tell you to step forward, count off another 10, the 11th man, and then after he was done, he would just tell the 12 or 13 people who had taken a step forward that he'd welcome them to the Marine Corps, and the rest of us were going in the Army. And that's how it was.
How did you feel about that?
I was glad I wasn't in the Marine Corps. I would much rather have been in the Army. I had no aspirations of going to Camp Pendleton, California, with the Marine Corps base for basic training. And I was fine with the Army.
So was there anything that, so other than where basic training was located, was there anything that made you feel more comfortable with the Army over the Marines?
Well, no, back then everybody knew that the Marine Corps was usually the first ones in, and the Army was second, although it wasn't always true, but that was the thought on the street, and I felt a little more comfortable with the Army.
How did your family feel about you being drafted?
There was concern. Back then in '66, Vietnam was just rolling up, and there was a lot of concern, and it was almost understood that a lot of us were going to end up in Vietnam. So there was a deep concern in the family, and the fact that I was the first of my generation of the family to go in the military. I had cousins and uncles that were in World War II, but nobody of my generation yet.
So when you departed for basic, did anyone offer you any words of wisdom, or did you did you have anyone who did serve that you kind of went to for advice?
No, not really. No, when we went for basic, I mean, you realize we're all 20 years old, and there were kids that I went to high school with that I got drafted with. That we knew each other, and we went to basic with each other, and you got split up once you hit the reception station down there. But no words of wisdom or anything like that. Just got on a plane in Cleveland Hopkins Airport in Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson. Welcome to your tent.
So how was basic for you then?
Basic was an experience. First of all, it was the middle of February, and if anybody tells you it doesn't get cold in South Carolina, it does. And we lived in tents. Basic training, we were in a tent. We were squad tents. I think there were 12 people in a tent. So in the reception station, you were in a tent, and for about a week or so till you got through processing and all your shots and everything else. And I'll never forget that we had coal stoves, and I hadn't smelled coal in years. The coal furnaces went out back in the 50s, and if you wanted to be warm in the tent, you had to fire up the coal stoves. And you'd wake up in the morning and your body would be outlined in black on the sheets from the coal dust. And blow your nose, all kinds of black coal dust be coming out of your nose every morning. So that was an experience, but once you got into March or April, it warmed up a little bit, and you didn't have to fire up the stoves. But the first basic and the reception station and basic training were intense for that.
Yeah. And then, did you get to pick your job before
No.
going, or did they give that to you while you were in basic?
Well, you took a battery of tests, and you had interviews and everything, and I got a chuckle during the interview process, and they stressed that everybody would get an interview, and you'd have input on your MOS, when nobody knew what an MOS was back then. During my interview, the gentleman, I don't know, he was probably an E5 sergeant or something, and he says, well, in the Army, what type of career would you like? I said, well, I'm a photo engraver's apprentice. You got the stars and stripes. I'd like something in the newspaper industry. Oh, okay. Checks it off. He says, and if you were going to be stationed anywhere in the United States, where would you like to be? Fort Hays, Columbus. They're building this new freeway, I-71. I'll be in Cleveland in an hour and a half. Okay. He says, and if you're going to be overseas, where would you like to be? Ireland. I always wanted to go to Ireland, so we don't have any bases in Ireland. Put me in England, that's close enough. Okay. I ended up a heavy vehicle driver in Vietnam. But at the time, was the build up for to get up to over 500,000 troops in Vietnam, and they needed transportation people, and if you knew what a carburetor was, it was almost a guarantee you were going to end up in some sort of transportation area for that. Lucky for me, I did.
Yeah. Did you learn that growing up? Or
Yeah, I always worked in gas stations and worked on cars. Always was in the automotive field for that. So as it turned out, it helped.
So then you kind of did the same profession in the Army than what your dad did.
Well, yeah, he drove for the local newspaper, the Plain Dealer in Cleveland, and when I got out of the Army, I went back into the photo engraving operation, and it just wasn't. You could see the writing on the wall. Automation was taking over, so I talked to my father, and I said, see if you can get me in the Plain Dealer as a driver. Well, I put an application in, and I started driving. That was in 1968, and I retired in 2006 as the transportation manager of the Plain Dealer.
So did you get trained to be a heavy vehicle driver in basic, or did you have to go to an AIT or
AIT,
school?
yeah. After your basic training, then they had the AIT, and I think it was like another eight or 10 weeks of truck driver school, basically. And and then they assigned you your MOS, and they give you a driver's license for everything. Hell, I had a driver's license for anything from a quarter-ton Jeep to a tractor trailer, and had a license to run a generator and to run a lawnmower. I was at 42 licenses.
Where was your AIT at?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So,
Yeah.
After basic, went home for a leave and came back to another tent and another 8 or 10 weeks there. And that's where I met a lot of the guys that I was with in basic, and right over to, we formed they reactivated a company, the 592nd Trans, and it hadn't been used since World War II. And we started at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and that's where they all bought us all after AIT from all other posts, not just Jackson, but everybody ended up at Fort Campbell, and we formed the 592nd Transportation Company. for further movement to a restricted area overseas, is what they told us.
And how was it being on Fort Campbell?
Well, Fort Campbell was an experience. That was the first time I ever encountered any airborne personnel, and they weren't too happy with us being there. They called us legs. We were the only legs on post at the time, and it was a dead giveaway because we'd walk around with the Third Army patch on, and they had the Screaming Eagles patch. So there were certain EM clubs you couldn't go in at a certain time because you know you were going to get a fight with something. But all in all, we were there from like maybe May to August, and matter of fact, we lived in barracks there. We were upstairs over some airborne company, I don't know what they even called them, some cav unit or something, and so we got in a few beefs in the barracks there too, but it was okay.
Yeah, coming from an airborne unit, being airborne myself, I definitely understand.
I'm sure you do.
So was it always kind of a butting heads between you guys and the airborne guys, or did you have any moments where there was kind of?
We stayed away from them, and they stayed away from us unless we were in a joint with them or that, and they were down there at Campbell, the Bastogne Club. You're familiar with Bastogne? Was a battle that they were involved with in World War II, and it was very sincere to them, and they didn't like us coming into their domain. But no, we knew we were going to be there for a short time, and basically on free time you'd bump into them, but other than that, no, you're okay.
What about with your own heavy vehicle drivers? Did you guys bond pretty tightly?
Oh yeah. And we were from all over. I mean, we had might have been 200 guys in the company. There might have been 40 or so from the greater New York area. There was another contingent from the Midwest, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee and stuff like that. And then we had another contingent from the South, the Carolinas, Georgias, the Alabamas, and then there was other contingent from the Californias. We had people in from California and that. So we all kind of melded real good together. And we had we were together probably 2-3 months before we shipped out, and then we had a 22-day boat ride going over there, and so we really got to know people real well on the boat with 5,000 other troops. But no, we did get along real good. There was no issues with our own company or the other transportation. We were in a group with 10 or 12 transportation companies. There was no issues.
So what were the different types of vehicles that you got to drive? You said that you had a license for almost everything.
Yeah, we had a license. Well, we were a self-sustaining unit. We had our main vehicle was the 5-ton cargo, the M54A2, and I think we had 60 of those, and we went all brand new equipment. I mean, we had to go up to Wisconsin, Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, where they were built, and we had a convoy them back down to Campbell. And then we had to put them on a train, lock and tackle them. They shipped them to Mobile, Alabama, put them on a boat. We went home for 30 days, and then we got on another boat, and they met us in Vietnam. But we had 65 tons, and then had maybe a half a dozen deuce and a halves, a couple 3/4 ton, and then a few Jeeps. The officers and some of the NCOs had Jeeps. And we had our own maintenance outfit. We had a wrecker. We were a self-sustained company. When we had our own mess people, cooks, bakers. We had it all, total package.
Was there any vehicle that you enjoyed driving over any other, or anything that stuck out in your mind?
The 5-ton was just a little bigger version of the 2.5 ton, and the 3/4 ton was fun to drive, or the Jeep was fun to drive, but it was just we were 20 years old again, so it was just going about it.
So when did you arrive at Vietnam?
We got on the boat, I think, September 15th or 16th of 66 in Oakland Army Terminal. And 20 or 21 days later, we got off at Cameron Bay, got on an LCU out in the middle of the harbor, and came in and hit the beach, just like you'd see on television. The door dropping, water splashing, stepping in the water, and you're on the beach. And everything you own is on your rifle at sling arms, and you got a duffel bag and a steel pot and the whole thing.
How did it feel?
Well,
that
I'll
boat onto the beach?
tell you, the night before we got off the boat, we were down the coast, down around Vung Tau, and we knew we were getting off the next day. And we're standing out on the deck looking out, because they were letting people off there. And we're looking, there's planes coming in and bombing the hills. You know, you're maybe 5 miles out in the bay, and you're, oh man, this is it. Tomorrow we're getting off the boat and we're going to be in the war. During the night, the boat goes up the coast. The next morning you wake up, and everything you own, you're at your assigned point where you're going to get off, and you're looking out, and you're 2-3 miles out in the bay, and you see all this black smoke. What the hell is this? This is it. This is the war. You know, going to get on the LCU, hit the beach, and well, as you're going in, you see more and more black smoke, and finally you get off, and there's a bus waiting for us on the beach, a military bus. Well, needless the black smoke, every company area, and Cameron was a pretty populated area. That's how they got rid of the waste. Every morning was some guy's job to pull the 55-gallon, the half a 55-gallon drum out full of human waste, dump it with diesel. Like, well, when you're 5 miles out in the bay and you see maybe 300 or 400 of these things, you wonder you're 20 years old, you wonder what the hell's going on.
I bet you were surprised to learn what that was.
Oh yeah, well we all learned that was part of duties.
So speaking of duties, what were some of your duties while you were in Vietnam?
Truck driving and offloading ships, and with anything from ammunitions, bombs, fuel, POL items, petroleum, oil, and lubricants. We'd haul bladders of jet fuel out to the Air Force Base. We'd haul bombs out to the Air Force, napalm, Agent Orange. We'd haul troops. We'd haul PX supplies. Anything that was needed for for the military. Lumber, you name it, we hauled it, and we'd either go to a pier, and they were deep draft piers at Cameron. Then they'd offload us or unload us right off the ship, or we'd back into LSTs. There was a beach nearby where they pull the LSTs right up. We'd back in, and there'd be a forklift there loading us whatever was on the LST. And we did that 7 days a week, 12 on, 12 off. And if you weren't working beach or ship detail, we're on convoy. And then you'd be, whatever was offloaded was destined for someplace in. 50, 100 miles inland. And the roads were not the greatest in that. But that's what we did for a year. And then sometime shortly after we got there, one of the NCOs took a liking to me, and he said, we need a dispatcher. And I ended up the company dispatcher. So it was my job to X amount of vehicles to a certain dock, or X amount of vehicles for convoy, and X amount of vehicles for beach detail and what have you. But it was still 12 on, 12 off, 7 days a week.
How did you feel transporting bombs or napalm or Agent Orange? And did they give you any training, or?
We were trained in truck driver school. I mean, as far as handling certain items, but as far as you just didn't want to drop it, or anything. And the bombs were, they weren't fused. They do that at the Air Force Base, but they were loaded. And howitzer shells. We hauled those, the 155s, and all that stuff. It was dangerous, but it was the job you had to do.
Did you ever have one fall off the back of your truck?
No, I never did, but I did see napalm the tube of, well, it's damn near as long as this table fall off. It just fell in the water, while it was being loaded, and left the damn thing in the water. He didn't stick around to see what happened with it later. I don't know if they cleaned it up or who knows.
So were you happy when you got moved to be a dispatcher? Did you feel like that was more responsibility?
Well, it was more responsibility, and yeah, it was a good move. I felt for me, it got me off the road, and I wasn't bouncing around in one of them trucks all day or all night, and it opened up opportunities for me. I learned how to type. Never typed before in my life. I had to type some kind of a report out as far as tonnage and everything we did every night, and I had to log them in, log them out, mileage, and all that stuff every day.
Did your convoy ever get attacked while you were out?
We were a couple times. There were incidents where there was a skirmish, and but there was we had no fatalities or anything like that. We were very fortunate. And again, it was 1966 and early 67 before things really blew up in the areas that we were in. Although there were a couple skirmishes.
Did the Viet Cong booby trap was booby trapping the road?
There would be booby traps on the road. There was I can remember driving by, seeing a truck that was it was a 5-ton dump, and if you're familiar with the dump bed, the headboard just in front of the cab, I mean, it was a hole in it like this, that he hit something, and some kind of mine, and something went right through the damn thing.
Wow.
Yeah. But ours, we didn't have, that I recall, any booby traps or anything. But there was always suspicion, it was there, and especially the local people. You could you know who's who or what, so you're always suspect of that.
Did you have to work with a lot of locals, or?
We hired them as I didn't personally, but I mean we had. They called them carpenters. They built some showers for us, which was nothing more than a wooden box that we put a couple of 55-gallon drums up on top with a little plumbing and a valve, and that would be filled up with water every day. And as long as the sun shined, you had a hot shower. When you went out there at night, you froze your ass off. And we had house girls that would do our wash and whatever needed, clean the hooch and stuff like that. Where we were at, it was all sand. I mean, it was like a big sandbox. And when we first got there was nothing. We put the tents up, again, the squad tents, and the first month or so we were sleeping on sand. We had army cots, but the floor was sand. And the wind blew, you were full of sand and everything. But we progressed, and as the lumber became available, we eventually got wooden floors. We built out of 55-gallon drums, filled them with sand, or sunk them, filled them with sand, made a foundation, and then put the wood on top of that, build a floor, and then still had the tent on top, and then eventually built some sides to the tent, so that basically at the end of it, only part of the tent we used was the roof. Still the 2 poles holding the damn thing up and everything like that. So in the year we were there, I wish I had some pictures to show you. A lot of progress was made. We basically built the company area for
that. In that year that you were there, does any memories stick out, or was there?
Just a good camaraderie, and it was something to see how, and at the time there was a lot of stuff going on back here in the States with all the protesting and the civil rights and everything else, and we never had any issues. I mean, you had people from all over the country, and we all got together and did the job.
So how did you feel about the protesters back home, or when you got drafted? Did you have an idea?
I knew it was going on. There was always something at some university somewhere you could see it, on television or that. But I didn't experience any of that. That's a draft board. Even coming home, I didn't experience it. And I know there was. I've seen it and I've talked to people, but coming back to Cleveland, I didn't have anything.
So, 'So, when you got back from the military, and or I'm sorry, when you came back from Vietnam, did you go back to another duty station, or
Yeah,
were you
yeah,
done?
I had. Well, you had an option. You could extend in Vietnam if you were 45 days or more to your ETS. You could extend in Vietnam and then give you what they call an early out. So I think I could have extended for 45 days or something and got an early out. And I said, the hell with this. I want to go home. So I came back, we flew back, flew in through Fort Lewis, Washington, and then like a 14-day leave or something, I forget. They give us all new uniforms and everything, and I was assigned to Fort Knox, Kentucky, at the Armor and Engineer Board, which was basically the job down there was I was an E5. I was in charge of a shift. I had 3 or 4 people under me that they test drove vehicles. Any new vehicle the Army was considering on buying, they would test them down there. And 2 of them at the time was the M715, which was a Jeep 3/4 ton pickup. They were replacing the old Dodge with that. And then the M656, which was a 5 ton, but it was an 8x8 and it swam. It had bilge pumps in it and it had a transfer case, and there was screws that you'd be out in the Ohio River, and we used to take them in the Ohio River and test them. That was fun, but it was a job. It was either 3 to 11, 11 to 7, or 7 to 3, 5 days a week. And I had a track. These people would drive the truck around, and every hour go out and stop them, check the oil, what's the mileage, check the tires, do this, do that. Okay, get going again, take it around. And I did that from November to February. And then I got February '68, I was out.
And then once you got out, you went back to the image.
Yeah, I went back to the photo engravers, and at the time, it was a 6-year obligation, the Army. 2 active, and it was 2 active reserve and 2 inactive reserve. Well, there were so many people that at that time went to reserves rather than enlist or wait to be drafted, that the reserve units just couldn't take all the people coming back from Nam. So I just had 4 years in active reserve with that. So I had no weekend warriors or Sunday mornings and all that stuff. And I went back as an engraver, and that lasted maybe 6 months. And I could see the writing on the wall, and that's when I went to work for the plane dealer, and the rest is history.
So how was it readjusting civilian life when you came back?
I really didn't have any issues. I mean, there were a lot of us that that got drafted, and a lot of us came back, and I had no issues really. I may have stayed out of work for maybe a week or so before I went back to work after getting out, and that was it. Probably if I had to serve reserve duty or something, it might have been a little different. But without any of that, just went back to the way things were.
So how would you say that your wartime experience affected your life?
Oh, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I think I'm a better person for it. Maybe not the wartime experience, but the Army experience, and just meeting people from all over the country, and living with them, and just like I say, open your eyes to a lot of different things.
What were some life lessons that you learned from the military?
Punctuality, regimentation. Really, I think a lot of it helped me in my future in my career as a manager, managing people, discipline, disciplining people, and as a supervisor, as a manager, treating people the way you want to be treated. And I got that. I think I got some of that from my military experience.
Well, I only have a couple questions left. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
No, I think that you're doing very well. Really.
Well, this is my last question then, but it's my favorite. What message would you like to leave for future generations who review this interview?
I think the military experience is good. I think it would be good for everyone. I would not have a problem reinstituting the draft. Not to say that we're in a wartime or anything, but I think everybody should have the opportunity to serve the United States, to serve the country, and not only will they serve it, but they will get something out of it too. I really believe that.
Well, this concludes our interview. I just want to say thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.